Welcome to This Explainer. Imagine trying to orchestrate the movement of $250 billion worth of cargo every single year. Seriously, wrap your head around that number. Well, that's the daily reality at the Port of Los Angeles. Today, we're diving into the massive digital transformation of America's busiest port. We're going to see exactly how a sprawling, highly physical seaport, handling literally millions of containers and driving a huge chunk of the national economy, is being totally revolutionized by software. It's this fascinating look at how old-school concrete, steel, and massive cargo ships are merging with cloud computing and big data. To truly understand why this massive shift is happening right now, we have to ask ourselves, how exactly does the busiest port in America prevent the next global supply chain meltdown? Think back to the pandemic for a second. We all remember staring at those frustrating out-of-stock messages online, right? Or, waiting 6 to 8 months just for a standard piece of furniture, all while dozens of massive cargo ships sat idling just miles off the California coast. That specific crisis, that massive bottleneck, sparked an urgent, totally undeniable need to build a smarter, way more resilient global supply chain from the ground up. So to understand this massive shift, we'll walk through the initial supply chain crisis, how they're building the digital port, mapping out a virtual digital twin, defending against cyber threats, the automation labor debate, and finally, a greener, smarter future.
Okay, Section 1, the supply chain crisis and the fragility in the global freight network.
During the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the breakdown of the global medical supply chain wasn't just an inconvenience, It was literally a life or death issue. Emergency initiatives like Logistics Victory Los Angeles, or LOVLA, had to step in to marshal resources, and they successfully routed 1.5 million units of personal protective equipment to 30 area hospitals. But here's the thing. This vital humanitarian response exposed a terrifying reality, the desperate need for digital visibility. In a global crisis, you can't just cross your fingers and hope vital supplies arrive at the right loading dock. You need absolute rock-solid data to route them efficiently, and at the time, that data simply wasn't accessible.
That brings us to Phase 2, building the digital port and moving from concrete to the cloud.
Now, before this big digital push, terminal operators, railroads, and truckers were largely operating in their own little silos. They were mostly relying on disconnected spreadsheets, clunky legacy software, or literally handing paper manifests through a truck window. To fix this whole mess, the port partnered with GE Transportation to create the Port Optimizer. Think of this as the port's digital central nervous system. It's a cloud-based portal that digitalizes all that maritime shipping data, creating a secure, single access point. So instead of everyone working in the dark, all the key supply chain stakeholders can finally see the exact same real-time data.
And the true power of a software system like this relies entirely on network effects. Today, get this, 9 out of the top 10 cargo carriers are feeding their live data directly into the optimizer. When almost the entire ecosystem is plugged into the same digital brain, cargo velocity skyrockets because the blind spots are finally removed. It's that critical tipping point where a tool becomes an industry standard, allowing everyone from ship captains all the way down to warehouse managers to coordinate their timing perfectly. To really accelerate this, they're backed by an $8 million state grant, and they're rolling out some incredible upgrades. For instance, they're building a universal truck appointment system. Imagine thousands of massive freight trucks no longer just showing up and waiting in line for hours, but having exact digital appointment slots coordinated right from a driver's smartphone. It's sort of like OpenTable, but for semi-trucks. They're also funding a mobile dashboard to help users anticipate bottlenecks before they happen, along with a green asset score to track emissions and help logistics companies pick the most eco-friendly routes. They aren't just relying on standard cloud databases, though. They are pushing right into the bleeding edge of modern technology. By applying AI predictive analytics, they expect to slash truck dwell times, meaning the time a truck just sits there waiting, by 12%. But even more mind-blowing, their use of quantum computing logistics. They're actually using advanced, incredibly complex mathematics to solve the classic traveling salesman problem for massive shipping containers, calculating the absolute perfect sequence for cranes to load and unload them. The result is a staggering 60% increase in crane delivery speed, while using 40% fewer resources. The massive physical infrastructure of the port is literally being sped up by advanced math. Wild, right? All this data gathering leads us to something straight out of sci-fi in Section 3, mapping the digital twin, or creating a virtual mirror world. The port recently issued a formal request for proposals to build a full digital twin. And they don't just want a static 3D map. They are seeking a turnkey solution to build a living, breathing virtual replica of the entire port. This simulated environment will integrate real-time spatial and operational data. Basically, if a crane moves in the real world, it moves in the digital replica. This allows planners to run endless simulations and stress test the port's infrastructure against future crises before they ever happen in reality. The sheer scope of this virtual mirror world is absolutely staggering. It systematically maps the above-ground buildings and towering cranes, sure, but it also goes deep underwater. It uses bathymetry to constantly track the health of the shipping channels and sediment levels. It maps out the hidden, complex labyrinth of underground utility pipes and pulls in live data from environmental sensors. It essentially gives port operators God mode visibility over 7,500 acres of land and water, completely eliminating operational blind spots. Moving right along to Section 4, defending against cyber threats, because securing the digital border is just as important as the physical one. Naturally, as the port's digital footprint expands, it becomes a massive, highly lucrative target for global cyber opportunists, ransomware gangs, and state-sponsored actors. Unauthorized intrusion attempts, meaning hackers actively trying to breach the port's systems, have skyrocketed 50% since early 2020. They are now fending off a staggering 40 million attack attempts every single month. Let that sink in. That is well over 1 million attacks a day aimed at the very infrastructure that keeps the American economy functioning. To survive this daily, relentless onslaught, the port has had to be aggressively proactive. Actually, a decade ago, they were the very first U.S. seaport to build a dedicated cybersecurity operations center. But the real game changer came in 2021 when they launched an automated cyber resilience center operated by IBM. Think of this like a digital neighborhood watch for the supply chain. If one cargo handler or tenant detects a brand new malware threat, the system instantly shares that early warning data across the network, acting as a collective shield to protect the entire port community. Now, this brings us to Section 5, a deeply complex and heavily debated topic, the automation labor debate, balancing efficiency and human impact. From the perspective of port leadership, heavily automating and digitizing operations is just a matter of basic economic survival. Executive Director Gene Soroka views digital transformation as the only viable way to make the economy truly resilient to future shocks. When you're tasked with moving over 10 million container units a year and actively competing against highly automated, state-of-the-art ports in Asia and Europe, leadership argues that algorithmic efficiency isn't just an option. It's a strict requirement to keep global trade flowing smoothly. On the flip side, harbor communities and labor representatives have profound, heavily researched concerns about this shift. A comprehensive study by the UCLA Labor Center pointed out that replacing human workers with massive, automated machines hasn't unequivocally proven to be more productive, safer, or even cheaper in the long run. They fundamentally question the actual return on investment when the human cost, the loss of experienced labor, and the potential for new mechanical bottlenecks are all factored into the equation. So we have this profound tension that will really define the future of the maritime industry. Corporate stakeholders are driven by the undeniable benefits of standardized efficiency, incredible processing speed, and unified data sharing. But local workers fear increased workplace surveillance, massive job displacement, and the extraction of local wealth to pad the profits of international shipping conglomerates. Labor advocates suggest we can easily boost overall productivity without sacrificing human jobs, for example, by simply expanding the port's operating hours to a 24/7 model or heavily investing in inland processing hubs. Finally, as we look to Section 6, a greener, smarter future and sustainability on a global scale. The port's strategic plan leans heavily into decarbonization, and data is the ultimate key to actually achieving it. They've established a landmark partnership with the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore to create a massive trans-Pacific green and digital shipping corridor. By sharing real-time digital data across 8,000 miles of ocean, they can actively track, manage, and ultimately reduce the colossal carbon footprint of international shipping vessels long before they even reach the California coast. It's a level of global coordination that was literally impossible just 10 years ago. Which leaves us to ponder this final, provocative question. As software successfully maps every ocean wave, algorithmically tracks every semi-truck, and calculates the mathematically optimal path for every crane, what is the ultimate future of the human worker in global trade? We've seen exactly how the digital brain of the port is actively solving crises and speeding up global commerce, but the delicate balance between concrete, code, and community, well, that's a story that is still being written. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.